My name is Richard Everhart Groves Jr., and I want to thank you for being here today. Most people, what they're trying to do is maintain their lifestyle for their lifetime. And guess what can impact that? Taxes. Today's program is Taxes in Retirement 567. It is a platform that we work with throughout the country, but I like to refer to retirement as freedom years, right? Retirement sounds like you're dying. I'm just gonna put it out there. Freedom years. Right? I like to refer it to that way, right? Freedom to do what you want, when you want, how you want, with whomever you want, without having worried about how it gets paid for. In this case, taxes can interrupt that in your freedom years. You'll also hear me refer to as lifestyle, as opposed to just finances, lifestyle. Because most people, what they're trying to do is maintain their lifestyle for their lifetime. And guess what can impact that? Taxes. Elmer J. Fudd, millionaire. I own a mansion and a yacht. I think we're in here. Most of you know who Elmer J. Fudd is. I'm dating myself as well. I paid what in taxes? And that is the conundrum of taxes. Apparently, though, right now we have the least amount of taxes on average that's been since like 1930-something. So at one point it was like up to 80% tax you had to pay out. It's around 35, 36, so woohoo! You know, we're averaging less than it has been in the past. But still, nobody wants to pay taxes as high as they are if they don't have to. This is also about education and information. And a lot of times when people come to these programs, they're looking to be sold something. You can't buy anything from me. There's nothing for sale. We don't do that. Everything here is about information and education. We tell people that because I need you to relax, right? No one's going to come put your arm up and you have to do, no, that's not what this is about. It's all about education. As I go on through this, you'll see what I'm talking about. It might be also a fire hose of information as well. Everyone has their own story, right? And I don't know what each one of your stories are, but however, I tell everyone, when you're doing this, when you come to these type of programs, ask questions. I tell everyone all the time, I was an educator for about 30 years working, doing things like in school system, colleges primarily, where it was personal and professional development. And I tell everyone, as I told my kids and the people I work with, every question you don't have an answer to is a smart question. Every question you don't have an answer to is a smart question. If you see something on the board, you don't know why this dot is here, ask the question, I don't care. It's a smart question because why? You did not have the answer to that. And guess who is this for? Is this for me? Because I know what it is. This is not for me, this is for you. Many times when people come out to programs like this, people use these big words about all these instruments and all these solutions and all these things, and then you leave here more lost than when you came in, typically. I don't need to show you how smart I am. What I need to show you is what applies to you, not to me. So a little bit about myself. My name is Richard Everhart Groves Jr. Yes, it's a long name. Proud of the name at this point. I was teased as a youth, but as you get older, it just sounds cooler as you get older, right? Richard Everhart Groves Jr. I have 2 kids. I like to say they're emancipated. How many of your kids are emancipated? You have emancipated kids, meaning they don't need money from you? Okay. So I mentioned earlier about lifestyle financial planning. Emphasis on lifestyle. Because what you have, and most people will talk about their finances. How much do I have? But what that doesn't tell you, does that map to your lifestyle? Case in point, working with a client recently, had him for a number of years, and he says, Richard, I'm getting ready to retire. So that's great. What are you going to do in retirement? Because that's what I want to know. That's the lifestyle. What are you doing in retirement, right? Well, I'm an alumni at this college. They just won their first championship for this particular sport. I want to go and hang out with those guys. I love doing that. I did that all summer long, and then I'm going to hang out with my girls, and I'm going to travel here. I'm like, that's great, man. What's your budget look like? All right, well, this is how much I spend right now. I'm working right now. Or let's take away the income you have now. Now what? He looks at me and I say, you're $6,000 deficit. His face changed completely. Right? Deficit. Now we'll figure out a way to get him to where he can have the life, but he was assuming, like most of us do, that just because I put money away, The money I put away is going to support the lifestyle I've grown accustomed to. And that is not always the case. Not when you throw things in here about how do you prepare for financial preparation when you look at taxes as one of those things. So you'll hear me talk about this IDMS, or income distribution maximization strategy, or report, a calculated lifestyle retirement budget strategy that supports your lifestyle for your lifetime, emphasis on lifetime. As we go through this, you'll see I want you to pull out the blue sheet in your form there. This is our evaluation page. Here you get to say how great I am. And I tell people lifestyle financial planning specialists, and here's why. Everyone has a primary doctor, right? I would assume so, right? And so when you go to the doctor says, hey, checks your blood pressure, right? Doctor says, hey, check your blood pressure. He checks your heart rate. He checks your eyes. He checks your weight. They say, well, you're a little bit heavy. You may need to reduce some of that. And you go, okay, all right. But if you have a heart problem, or you think you have a heart problem, do you go to the primary doctor or do you go to a cardiologist? How many go to a heart doctor, right? I'm a heart doctor. Okay, I should first tell you that I am not a CPA. I'm a lifestyle financial specialist, what we focus on. Anything we talk about taxes, we encourage you to go see that person, that specialist. One thing we do well, lifestyle financial planning. I am not a CPA. Although I understand Social Security, we are not regulated by the Social Security Administration. I can give you information, and that's what I will do. Anything else beyond that, you want to go to them. Okay, so our goals. Our goal is to engage with you, because when you're engaged, you learn something, right? You're paying a little bit more attention. Inform you, just like I was saying about the big, beautiful bill. We're going to give you information to make you have more knowledge on things. Because if you are more informed, you can make more knowledgeable decisions, right? And at last but not least, the goal here is to educate you. Now, all these things really mean nothing if we give you knowledge, and they say knowledge is power, right? But if you don't use knowledge, knowledge is powerless. Or don't know how to use knowledge. That's what I'm here for. I wouldn't have a job if everyone in here knew how to use all this information that I'm going to give you. So one of the things that I hope people do is, when I'm trying to engage, inform, and educate, is be open to possibilities, open to new solutions. Sometimes, depending upon who you've been talking to about finances and so forth, they have given you specific information. And then when you get specific information and that person, you've been loyal to them over time, a lot of times you don't think anything else is relevant because you have not either heard about it, the person that you value has not told you about it, so consequently you think it can't be correct. And that is absolutely not true. Obviously, no one knows everything. I don't know everything, which is why I have a back office with a number of people that I work with in order to get more information. I'm never going to tell you that I know everything, because I don't, right? So perception is reality. So here's a picture here. How many people see the old woman in the picture? How many see the young woman? How many see both? Perception is reality, because both of those images are in there. And my job is to help you see both sides so you can make a better decision on your future or your lifestyle. So let me just clarify. So this big nose here and the mouth is the old woman, right? The young woman now, this little tiny nose here with a cheekbone here and a chin, neck here and her ear here, that's the young woman. Now, I'm not going to say any of us are in here old, because I still have not adopted the idea of being old yet. My mother told me, you're a senior, honey. I said, stop saying that. Right? She's 90, but still, stop saying that, mommy. The challenge a lot of times we have as educators is that because you've been told one thing for so long, a lot of times you don't believe other things are possible or that it's not true and so forth. I'm here to tell you that knowledge is power. The more information I give you, the more you can see that things are not what they seem to be, regardless of who was telling you. Now, a lot of times, people who are telling you certain things, maybe they don't have all the information. And that's fine. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm not saying any of the people that you have spoken to were not giving you great advice. Sometimes there's just information you didn't have. So we found there's 3 types of personalities in terms of financial planning. The saver. The saver is a person, you went to work, I got my IRA, it's on automatic pilot. They take out 5–10%. I know at the end of the rainbow, there's going to be something there for me. Then there's a planner that says, oh, I'm saving, but I'm saving because at this end of the rainbow, I want to be able to do the things I've talked about earlier, the lifestyle financial planning, right? I want to be able to do that. And they say, okay, I put all that together. And then there is the risk manager that says, okay, at the end of the rainbow, how do I ensure that all this lifestyle I've created, I'm able to keep it? And not everybody's all these things. Some people are, but this is what we found over the years, that it depends on where you are. Maybe, I don't know about you, but when I was growing up and other friends of mine, we talked about, who talked to you about finance when you were growing up? You had to learn that on your own. I think a lot of you were contemporaries to some extent. It was grown folks' conversation, right? Families always didn't have those conversations about finances and telling you what to do next. This is Mount Everest. And then when people are going up Mount Everest, we look at that as planning for the future. This is going up Mount Everest here. And what we find is this is what we call the accumulation stage. Some of you are past this stage now. Accumulation, you put everything together. You had your 401k, your IRA, your CD, you bought some real estate, or you inherited some things. All these things are great. That's the accumulation phases. And during this time when you were working, you could take losses. 401k went down 2008 when they collapsed almost completely. Maybe you cried a little bit, but you were still working and you're hoping it comes back, right? But here's what we find. 42% of Americans will retire broke. 42%. And it's not that they didn't do this. It's just that some of the other things that we talked about, they missed. Taxes are one of those things. And so the strategy you had when you were going through the accumulation phase can't have the same strategy in the distribution stage, when you're taking money out and paying what? Taxes. And we always say that bags of cash are not income, meaning that 401k, that IRA, that CD is not income unless you create an income out of it. And then now we're looking at what we're here to talk about today. And so why do I've been harping on this whole budget idea, right? 73% of Americans don't have a budget they regularly use. How many people have a budget? How many of you have it written down? The hands went down a little way. So if it's not written down, you're unlikely to have a financial plan. 65% of Americans don't have a financial plan, hence why 42% of the people retire broke. And again, it's not that they don't have money. You've heard the whole adage that I'm on a fixed income. Some of you might be saying that I'm on a fixed income. I believe fixed incomes are the kiss of death, right? Because they don't take in consideration inflation, if your money's still in the market, sequence of return, we'll talk about that too. All those impact taxes to some form. We'll go through it. Again, this is a fire hose of information. I encourage you to take some notes because you're like, Richard, I got that one little thing you said. All right, so let's get into the tax area itself. Marginal tax rate. Have you heard what marginal tax rate before? Anyone heard that statement before? Show of hands, right? I think everybody has an idea what marginal tax rates are, but I'm not sure if everyone understands how they work. And that's where we start talking about the impact of not understanding marginal tax rates and also the effective tax rate. And I'll explain that in a second too. So here is the marginal tax rates, right? And so what this is basically telling you is that if you are in, let's say, this category here, as a single person or as an individual or as a couple, you're making 48 to 100,000, 96 to 200,000, and you're at that 22% percentile, right, tax rate. But you are not paying 22% on this money. The effective tax rate has to do with the first $11,000 or $23,000 that you make is taxed at only 10%. And then after the $11,995, the next group is taxed at 12% or $23,000. And then the next piece up here is taxed at 22%. So if you add these three up, which would be 44%, and you divide it by 3, it would roughly be 14.66%. That's your effective tax rate. But most people think I'm paying 22%. And the reason why you think that a lot of times is because we haven't put in their state taxes, which also increases it. But the federal tax rate is that's what this looks like. And depending on the next move up impacts your tax rate. And we'll talk about that. The impact of just putting another $1,000 out of some fund, out of an RMD you have to pay out, or taking more from a seed or someplace else where it's considered income. So ordinary income tax map, the impact of $1,000, just $1,000 extra coming out. So you hear here, we go back here. So if you pay, go back here, and let's say at the 12%, and if you're making anywhere from, to say, how many people are married in here, by the way? Let me show hands. Okay. right? So, and singles, they say singles have more fun, but I'm not sure about that. So the $23,000, so if you get extra $1,000 in that $23,000 to 96, below the 96, so you just, let's say it increased to $95,000, that 1,000, doesn't impact us at all, right? Right? You still stay in the same bucket, so to speak. However, you'll start to see an increase when that extra 1,000 goes back 96,000, you go up to that 22% tax rate. These numbers here, this is what's called Medicare Part B and D. Medicare is impacted also by an $1,000 increase because it's pushed you past a threshold. So now not only are your taxes going up, but now you're paying also more for Medicare. Each person, this $1,052 each year. Just that $1,000 impact has put you into another tax category, as well as created a challenge for you, possibly a challenge for you for your Medicare. So what happens a lot of times when you get pushed in there because you've taken out, let's say, RMDs, required minimum distribution, and then you realize, why my Social Security go down? What? Because everyone's really paying attention. They took more money? Why did they take more money? It's because of this. And we'll go into that as well. The goal here is how do we structure certain things, or at least understand what they are, so that you're not caught off guard when they do happen. Capital gains, those additional, so you have some securities, right? You have real estate, right? And the capital gains, the same process. If you were making $0 to $40,000, zero on your capital gains. So just like the income increases, capital gains will be applied by the same rules. If you got an extra $1,000, so we've shown that extra $1,000 not only increased your tax burden on your general income, it increased your cost for your Medicare. And now, because you've got past that, now there's a 15% on the capital gains that you didn't have before. So what we're looking at is how do we structure ourselves so that we pay attention to what happens if we get pushed into these other categories. A lot of us don't know that it's happening, right? Because we just assume that when we have those things like a required minimum distribution, right? We're just going to pay that, we'll pay that tax, but we don't know the total impact of it. And that's why you hear things like reverse conversions, right? Roth conversions and things of that nature. So here's what it's talking about. So we pushed that past that $96,000 again. We're showing that area where it got past that $96,000. You're over that mark. So now they're charging you, you're getting 15% on any capital gains you have. And as it grows up, it pushes you up here to 20%. You can see where we're going, right? This is not rocket science here. It is literally 1 + 1 = 2. But most people don't talk about these things. Again, what most people look at is they look at that 401k before you retire. How much do I got? And if the market's up, you're like, right? Dancing around. 2008, you weren't dancing so much, right? Drop down, now you're hoping it goes back up. But no one talks about the ripple effects of all this. A lot of advisors don't talk about the ripple effects. That's why I always tell people you need a second opinion. Make sure your heart is working correctly. So the other portions of capital gains are mutual funds, pass-through, rebalancing triggers, long-term gains can create ordinary income tax. I mean, it's the same thing. You're just pushing, you're making more money in some of these things, but it's also impacting you from a tax perspective. Municipal funds or muni bonds or municipal bonds, right? You go like this library here was probably built with municipal bonds. The city puts requests out, you can buy into the city, you can contribute to the development and give you 3% on that money. You're like, yeah. And you don't have to pay any taxes on it. Yes and no. It impacts the income, ordinary income that we just talked about. Now you don't pay taxes on that money you got from just the mutual, but it impacts the other side of the taxes. So the government gives you and they take us away. I mentioned what the effective tax rate was. Remember, I told you that it starts out, graduates, your first 10,000 at the 20,000, and we divided those three, gave us to 14.66. That's the effective tax rates, not the marginal, right? And that's all this represents. How much of your last dollar do you actually lose, Uncle Sam? The effective tax rate is what you're actually, what are you losing? Is what you're actually paying. So some of these deductions you've probably seen before. The amount deducted from taxable income, standard deduction, $30,000 is a married couple, $15,000 a single. alternate itemization, mortgage on debt, 750, all these things here are some of the deductions that we have presently. Now, there is a new deduction, apparently, if you're 65 years or older, that you're going to get, but it's a limited time. And when I send you that form out, you'll be able to see what that looks like, all right? As I said, so many things have changed. They're changing very quickly. And I don't want you to leave. He didn't even talk about that. I didn't talk about it because we're just getting all the information as well. For being alive, 4,000 gone. Deductions. Some other incentive behavior that also can reduce things are things like home care tax credits, earned income, foreign tax credits, savers credit, child credit. And these are just some of the other credits that are available out there. They all impact kind of taxes you're going to pay in the future, right? Somebody asked me about RMDs, think in the back there. It just throw a whole bunch of wrenches into your freedom years, right? Your requirement in distribution, capital gains, Social Security, Medicare premiums. I've kind of set you up for how all these things are domino effects when you're receiving them or when you start to receive them. I think RMDs are kind of the most insidious elements out there. And so at age 73 presently, 73, you have to start taking RMDs, required minimum distribution. How they calculate it is they determine how long they think you're going to live. And in this case here, 26.5 years, and they divide the whole amount that you have saved up, which equals $18,868, and that's what you pay taxes on. That's not the taxes you pay taxes on that amount, right? It averages roughly 3 to 4% that you're taking out. But what they don't tell you is that as you get older, the amount you have to take out increases. Why? Because Uncle Sam wants his part. They've done a calculation. I think the number or the amount of money that is in retirement accounts is something like $33 trillion. So in the future, do you think taxes are going to go up or going to go down? Up. And you think, what is Uncle Sam waiting? If they know that you have $33 trillion waiting for them in an account that they can tax in the future, you think they did that out of the goodness of their heart to wait to age 75? All that means is that money grows even more, which means that they have more money to tax. The biggest concern most people have in retirement is outliving their money. I'll say that again. The biggest thing is outliving their money. Now, if you have to pay RMDs plus taxes, and you are living off this, and now you have to pull money out an account to pay taxes on that you also are living on, do you think there's a possibility that you could outlive your money? We'll talk about that. It's called sequence of return. I'll go in that a little bit. Here's the uniform lifetime table that they have. And you can see here 72, so a 27-year period, you can see how the numbers keep going down. And as you get older, if you live longer than you expected, you have to pull more money out of that hard-earned stash of cash you have, right? And you're hoping when they take money out of it, it's up here, not down here. How many people have family members who are in their 90s now? Anybody? My grandmother lived to 100. My mother is 90. They didn't know. We actually kind of assumed because my grandfather's mother was 93. So, you start to pay attention to the patterns. Now, the other side, how many people are married in here? All right. So there's a statistic, all men in here, that says if you are married, you live longer. Turn to your wife, if she's here with you, and say, thank you very much, honey. Right? You're the reason that I'm alive. Right? Now, I said this to a group of people, and a woman said, but we die sooner too, because they had to deal with them. I'm like, well, that's not true, but okay, I'll go along with it. And so a lot of the strategies have even more to do with how long you might live, the what ifs. It's not enough to say I have this pile of money over here. It's the what ifs. Even the taxes that we're talking about, the what ifs. What if taxes increase? And I'm on this fixed income, and then cost of living keeps going up, but I'm on this fixed income, and they're still charging me more taxes on this. Do you think your lifestyle is going to change at all? Guaranteed it's going to change. So those are some of the things, the strategies and elements that we want to look at the what ifs. It's not enough to have your pile of money. And then when you put it this way, this is what a lot of this looks like to a lot of people here, right? Gobbledygook. I call this don't keep up with the Joneses game here. This shows you really how prepared you are and things maybe you need to focus on. And you grade yourself on this. I do not grade you because I don't want anyone to feel embarrassed, right? This is specifically for you. Ironically, I'm writing a book called Don't Keep Up with the Joneses, They're Broke, which hopefully will be out later this year as well. And then we're going to ask you, were you a Jones or a Smith? Jones being the person trying to keep up and not necessarily looking at everything as well as they could. Smith done everything correctly. The 5 elements we always look at: mortality, longevity, mortality risk, health risk, market risk, inflation risk. All these things are important, right? So the first question is, how much will you need if you live to 90? If you know that answer, give yourself a point. Now, none of you know the answer. I know that. It's kind of one of those things that I knew you couldn't answer the question, right? But you need to still plan if you might live to 90. Next question. Do you have income costs of living increase? I talked about that. I'm on a fixed income. Do you have cost of living increases that keeps up with changes in the cost of living? If you have that, give yourself a point. We're going to go this fairly quickly. Do you have guaranteed lifetime income besides a pension, Social Security, and annuity? Do you have all? If you have all 3, God bless you. You are doing fairly well here. If you lose a spouse, do you have something in place that replaces Social Security? And loss of a spouse can also increase your taxes, and we'll go about that too. Do you know how much of the benefit you will need? If you have a pension, do you have a pension that goes to the spouse, right? Usually it's a survivor pension, right? A lot of people don't look at what that looks like. How much do I need, right? I've had some clients decided to take 100% and buy a life insurance policy because it was cheaper to do that than getting only 50% of their income. And then so in the future, the spouse gets more than they expected anyway, right? It's just, again, a strategy. Also, that's going to be tax-free. Again, I'm big on tax-free, obviously, right? Next one. 2 points here. Do you know the percentage of people over 65 will have a healthcare event? Again, all this impacts you. What is long-term care cost? What is the average stay in the facility for a man or a woman, which is a big question, right? What's that cost? Do you know what percentage of Americans will retire broke? You should know this. I gave you that early on, so I'm going to give you 2 points for that. Will your income be affected by market losses or sequence of return? We talked about this. Does inflation have an impact buying power in the future? Absolutely does. What is inflation today? It's 2.7, those you'll know. Does inflation matter? I believe it does. Gives you 2 points for those. Now here's the real question here. Where do you fit? Now only you know which one of these attribute to you. I'm not going around the room or anything. I just need you to be thinking about all these things are domino effects on the tax consequences. This is all very intentional, right? Some people, I'm going to learn about taxes, yes and no. You're going to learn about what impacts the taxes. For me, just to tell you that, yeah, tax level is this, the marginal is this, really doesn't matter. What matters is what are the things that impact, what are the domino effects that impact the tax consequences? And then can we do anything about them? All right, Social Security. Someone asked me, what happens if you make more over a certain amount? Social Security has a level at which they say you can make, and then after that it's called provisional income, in which a portion or 50% of Social Security will be taxed at that point. If you don't have any provisional income above a certain amount of Social Security, you are not taxed on Social Security. So provisional income takes into consideration ordinary income, meaning that you're working, income's coming in, dividends, as you mentioned here, lady, capital gains, non-taxable interest, which would be that's municipal bonds that I talked to you about earlier, right? And if it exceeds this, they're taking 50% of your Social Security is going to be taxed. So here's what it looks like. Those 50%, 70%, doesn't mean you're being taxed. 50% of your Social Security is being taxed. Let me just show you here. So $20,000 from Social Security with $40,000 traditional IRA withdrawal means you have $50,000 of provisional income. So what they did, they took 50% of the 20 and added to the additional income you got from your IRA, which gave you that $50,000 provisional income. That's how they're taxing the Social Security. If you do not make over that $25,000, you're not taxed. But most people can't live on $25,000 in most cases. The same thing, $40,000 Social Security, $20,000 traditional IRA, $40,000 of it is provisional income. I talked earlier the impact of these additional income on your Medicare bill, right? And we call it IRMAA, income-related monthly adjustment amount. That extra $1,000, what happens here? So you can see here, if you are a couple, $2,000, $212,000 or less, $106,000 as a single person, my Medicare cost does not go up. Part B does not go up. $185,000 averages now. The next line, you can see what happens. As soon as you get past that extra $1,000, that's $74 each person in the household, up to $259 monthly now. And you can see the increase as we go along, just for a single $1,000, depending upon where you are. Case study, married jointly, Social Security, $60,000 combined, $15,000 net long-term capital gains, $45,000 required minimum distribution. I like that word, required minimum distribution here. Here's the impact of that $1,000. You see that number at 49% basically. So that extra $1,000 we talked about when you got pushed into the next tax bracket, the implications of that, right? So now you're at that 12% number, right? Causes $850 taxable of your Social Security at the time, 50%, 12% tax bracket, 102. Now you're thinking that that $1,000 should be only $120, right? But the ripple effect of it, because now it causes the $1,800 capital gains to be taxable at 15%. That before it was zero. So that $1,000 now you're paying almost $499 on just that increase because of the ripple effect, which is why you see that you just paid 49% on that $1,000. Now the effective tax rate is roughly 38% on a simple increase. Now some of these things, there's nothing we can do about it, right? Sometimes there's nothing we can do about it. But then there are some times that we can, if we plan accordingly, depending upon where you are in the process. So the tools that we talked about, and that's what diversifying the account, the IRA, the Roth, including Roth conversions, non-qualified accounts. Non-qualified accounts are just accounts that have already been taxed, just so you know. You hear words called qualified accounts. Qualified just means it's never been taxed. There's only the two differences, right? Properly blend withdrawals from different accounts, which is another strategy. Consider which assets should be held and which should be kept, right? Defer or not to defer. So there's three types of money as we go into this. And this is where we start to look at, okay, the nuts and bolts of how do we start planning effectively for these challenges? So there's three buckets, your 401k, IRA, the non-qualified account, tax-free account, everybody understands that. And we talked earlier about all those buckets of exemptions and the other things the credits and so forth. That's where it's talking about the 7 brackets. And then capital gains, you have 3 brackets. And then the Roth IRA, it's basically the same thing. Over here, it's just no taxes on the last one. So again, at death, so this is the worst bucket to be in at death, right? Because that money is fully taxable going if it's a legacy piece. And they have the Secure Act 2.0, which says basically you have to pull that money out over a 10-year period and pay taxes on it. So if it's going to your kids or anyone is going to simply, they're going to pay taxes on that money over a 10-year period. And now typically, this is after it's grown for a period of time, and maybe it's going to individuals who have basically also, their income has also grown. So now let's say the couple I'm talking about, 10 years down the line, is $3.2 million, and you have 2 kids, all of a sudden they have to take out, $200,000 a year for the next 10 years, or $300,000 a year for the next 10 years, and pay taxes on that in addition to whatever they're making, right? Not a great place. Capital gains, they have this thing called a step-up basis. So let's say, for example, you have, what Sandra she has equity, projects and stocks and so forth. And today, let's say she had bought NVIDIA. And NVIDIA, when 10 years now, is worth $200,000 and she passes. Well, the value of it is determined the day she passes, which would be $200,000. And that the kids who inherited, if they sold it, there would be no capital gains on it, because there's a step-up basis at the time of death. Now, conversely, though, if she had it and it's $200,000 and she sold it, she got it for $10,000 and sold it for $200,000, she had to pay $190,000 in taxes on it. Some of these things can be very beneficial for the next group if we're planning correctly. Step-up basis happens in real estate, just as you said, right? And then obviously underneath the tax-free, we're not even worried about that. Secure at 2.0 still applies to the Roth IRA, except that when they take the money out of it, they're not being taxed on it. It's tax-free. Defer or not to defer. This is really, we're talking about the Roth conversion. We've got 100,000 and 75,000. The conversion, that we took out 25,000 on one end and we kept it the same 100,000 over here. Now again, 10-year period. This could be very beneficial for some folks. It's not beneficial for everyone, right? Because that 25 tax deduction today, let's say if it grows in the future, then it's a great thing. But if it doesn't, and we do, and I'll show you, we have an application that we use to come up to look at how this might work, right? So now over a 10-year period, that IRA grew to 200,000, your Roth grew to 150,000. There's a $25,000, 25% taxes on that. So now they take 25, you got 150,000 over here after taxes, and over here, 150,000, no taxes paid on it. Now, but if you die, this $200,000 that pass on will be completely taxable to your legacy. On the other side, that $150,000 is not taxable, which is why people look at conversions. Again, it all depends on where you are. Time horizons is what I have to look at it. Giving you an example of a person, 66,000, you can see the number 4.3 recommended Roth conversion between 2020 and 2025. Apparently right now is the best time to try and do these things because taxes are relatively low compared to what they've been historically. I know nobody in here feels that way, but that's what we're told. And so what we use to determine the valuation, whether or not it's a good thing to use, we have an application inside we use. And so in this particular scenario, but here this $4,038,000 more coming to you versus if you didn't do a conversion, right? That's the amount of money you have more over time because it's not going to be taxed versus if you didn't do a conversion. And again, everybody is different. I know you're trying to see over there. It's small print. The point is that we have a tool inside that allows us to look at these strategies and come up and see what works. It's not enough to say you should do a Roth conversion. Anyone that just tells you that haphazardly is not working on your behalf in a way that is, you need to come concrete. It needs to be written down. It needs to look at different strategies and see the impact of all the strategies, not just the one strategy, because they're all connected. Now, here's the thing that got me too. I talked about how long it would take if you are married and you filed jointly versus if you were a widower. So this is the tax consequence of filing together. $96,000 income, 7.7 effective tax rate. The impact of losing your spouse. The effective tax rate when you're together, but 14.2% when you lose a spouse. All of a sudden, almost double your tax consequences. You don't have as much deductibles. Remember the other was $30,000, so now it's just half of that. So all of a sudden now you have increased just because nothing you could do about losing a spouse, but they penalize you basically for doing that. But what's the tax strategy for this? Well, how do we mitigate this, right? Getting closer to the end, and I mentioned earlier about what we call sequence of return. Market goes up, you're very happy. Market goes down, not so much. Market goes up, very happy. It's like a roller coaster, right? In retirement or your freedom years, it's not a really cool thing. If you're basing your lifestyle on how much you have available to you. So Mr. Happy on this side has $100,000, Mr. Unhappy has $100,000. All we did was, in the beginning of the year, we're saying it's positive returns. And he saw negative returns toward the end, the 9th and 10th year, Mr. Happy. Mr. Unhappy, we just reversed it because the sequence, we don't know what the sequence is going to be. But when we reverse it, that same numbers, we find that Mr. Unhappy has $38,000. Mr. Happy says $105,000. He's happy because he has more money applied to him, more money to live off of. So when we look at these things, we look at the impact of this because that money is still being taxed. And if you're living off it, you're living off of less. So how do we mitigate some of these challenges? Some people feel that, okay, I have money in the market, I have a good amount of money, but if 2008 happens again, and you just lost 38, 40% of your money, did you just take a deep breath?
Don't bring up 2008.
I'm telling you. What you get when you come in to see us, right? You do an analysis of all this, the impact of all the tax consequences that could possibly occur with regards to RMDs, Social Security, capital gains, all these things we look as a domino effect. You get an actual application, you get a form for that. You get a certificate of completion when you come in to see us, because we believe that, I've been a teacher and I'm like, look, this is really important. So you actually get a certificate because we do a lot of work on your behalf. It does not cost you anything to come in and see us. There is no cost for this, right? It's just something that we do in our office. If you choose to work with us, we provide solutions and suggestions. We're more than happy to take you in. If you don't, we're still more than happy that you just honored us to come in and see us to see if we could help, right? So you get that. You're going to get the other information on the big, beautiful bill, the implication of the tax consequences. You're going to get that as well. And then you get our continued workup on all the things that are happening in the market. We're always getting white papers. Those of you who are readers, we have information that constantly come into our office about what's happening. Those of you who are more visual, we have videos if you just want to look at a video of what's going on. Whatever it is that we can help you with, we are more than happy to do so. So this is what it would look like. We look at all these things here, the freedom years, retirement years, strategic planning, insurance, wealth management, all these things that we do in our office. And we full service shop. So our goal is to bring more value than you expected, always, right? So I want to thank everybody for showing up today. I really appreciate your time. Again, my name is Richard Everhart Groves Jr. And I want to thank you for being here today.